Hello everyone and welcome to the biology lecture series, and today we'll be discussing the topic sexual reproduction in the flowering plants. Okay, so this lecture is the continuation of the previous lecture. So in the previous lecture what we have studied about the microsporogenesis and then the megasporogenesis, and we studied about the embryo sac also, that the embryo sac is 8 nucleated and 7 celled. All right, now in this lecture we'll be studying about the pollination. So first of all, I would like to give you a brief introduction about the pollination. What is pollination? So pollination is the transfer of the male gametes from the anthers to the stigma. Okay, so we know that the stamens, they represents the male reproductive part. Stamens, these are the male reproductive part, and it is called androecium. Now the stamen, it consists of these are the anthers and this is the filament. This is the anther and this is the filament. Now after the dehiscence of the anther, pollens are released. Okay, so we have studied in the previous lecture that anthers are usually bilobed and each lobe consists of 2 pollen sacs, and the pollen sacs, they consist of the pollens. Okay, clear? So anther, it consists of 2 lobes. Now we are talking about the anther. It consists of 2 lobes. It is bilobed and each lobe contains 2 pollen sac. This pollen sac is also known as microsporangium, and within pollen sac what is present? Pollens are present. Okay, now the transfer of the pollens from the anthers, okay, because pollens are produced in the anthers, to the stigma. Okay, now let's draw the stigma, style and ovary. So we are talking about the gynoecium now. Okay, the swollen part is known as the ovary. This is the style and this is the stigma. Clear? So this is what? This is a pistil, okay, which represents the gynoecium. So gynoecium is the female reproductive, okay, part of the flower. Clear? And gynoecium, it consists of the pistil. So the transfer of the pollens, okay, from the anthers to the stigma, all right, is known as pollination. Clear? Now pollination, how can we define pollination? The transfer of pollen from the anthers to the stigma. This is known as pollination. Now pollination can be of lot of types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. So we'll study about the pollination and the types of pollination in this lecture. Okay, so in the previous lecture you must have studied, okay, that the male and the female gametes in the flowering plants are produced in the pollen grain as well as the embryo sac. Okay, so pollen grain, we have studied that pollen grain, it produces the 2 male gametes. Okay. Now you must have also known most of the pollens, they are released at the 2-cell stage. Okay. So let's draw a pollen at 2-cell stage. So there is a bigger cell, which is known as the vegetative cell. And the lower one, this is known as the generative cell. Okay. Now this is the pollen in 2-cell stage. Now the generative cell divides further to give rise to 2 male gametes. Alright, so pollen grains, they produce 2 male gametes. Now, female gamete, which is known as the egg, this is produced within the embryo sac. Okay, so we can write here the embryo sac, which is also known as the female gametophyte. Pollen grain is known as the male gametophyte. So embryo sac, you must be knowing about the structure of the embryo sac. So it consists of the egg apparatus at the micropylar end, it consists of antipodals at the chalazal end, and then it consists of 2 polar nuclei which are present within the central cell. So embryo sac, okay, it consists of the egg. The female gametophyte gamete is present within the embryo sac. Clear? So embryo sac is known as the female gametophyte. You should remember this. Question can come from this. And the pollen grain, this is known as the male gametophyte. Clear? This is clear. Now egg is present within the embryo sac. So let's draw a rough sketch of the embryo sac. Okay, so embryo sac, you looks like this. Okay. So we are drawing the embryo sac now. This is the micropylar end. And this is the chalazal end. Alright. At the chalazal end, antipodals are present. These are the antipodals. Okay, these 3 cells, these are the antipodal cell. Then we have these ones are what? These ones are the polar nuclei. And then at the micropylar end, there is one large egg cell, and then there are 2 synergids. So these are antipodal cell. Okay. There are 3 antipodal cells. Then these 2 are the polar nuclei. This one is the central cell. Then this one is the egg. So the egg is present within the female gametophyte, and these 2 are the synergids. So you can see, so egg and the synergids, these are known as the egg apparatus. So you can see the egg, which is the female gamete, is present within the embryo sac. So this is what? This is the embryo sac. Alright. Now, the 2 gametes, the male gametes as well as the female gamete, these are non-motile. Okay. So they have to be brought together for fertilization to occur. Fertilization means fusion of the 2 gametes. So for the fusion of the gametes, what needs to be done? So first of all, they should be brought close to each other, but both the male as well as the female gamete, they are non-motile in case of plants. So what is happening? So there is a requirement of the pollinators. Okay, so how is this achieved? This is achieved by the mechanism known as the pollination. And for pollination, there are a lot of agencies required. So, some of them are abiotic, some of them are biotic. Okay, we'll talk about the abiotic and the biotic pollinators. All right. So the pollination is a mechanism through which the male and the female gamete are brought close to each other. Now next, the transfer of the pollen grains which are shed from the anther to the stigma of the pistil. This is known as the pollination. Okay. Now the flowering plant has evolved an amazing array of adaptations to achieve the pollination. Clear? Now they may use of the external agents to achieve pollination. So these external agents, these are known as the pollinators. Okay, these are known as pollinators. These external agents. These external agents, it can be abiotic or they can be biotic. Abiotic are like water, wind. Okay, biotic are like animals. All right, like honeybees and all, bats. Now, can you list these possible agents, external agents? So these are, if we talk about abiotic one, what are the abiotic pollinators? So we are talking about the pollinators. First is by water. Pollination by water. Here, water is the external agent. So this is known as the hydrophily. Okay, so pollination by water is known as hydrophily. Okay, so you can write here pollination by water. This is known as hydrophily. This is the first, and second is the wind. Wind, this is known as anemophily. Means pollination by wind. Here, wind is acting as a pollinator. Clear? So these are some of the abiotic factors. Then let's talk about the biotic factor. Clear? First was water, second was wind. Now let's talk about the biotic factor. So these are animals. The pollination by animals, this is known as zoophily. Okay. Here pollinators are these animals. So pollination by animals. This is known as zoophily. For example, bats, honeybee. So these are the external agent that causes the pollination, or you can say that causes the transfer of the pollens from the anther to the stigma. Clear? Now let's talk about the kind of pollination. Now, depending on the source of pollen, pollination can be divided into three types. So there are three types of pollination. Let's talk about the first one. First one is the autogamy. Now, auto means self. So it is self-pollination. So in this type, what is happening? Pollination is achieved with the same flower. Pollination is achieved within the same flower. Okay, what does this mean? This means the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, so this is known as self-pollination or self-fertilization. Here, the transfer of the pollens from the anther takes place to the stigma, okay, of the same flower. So this is known as self-pollination or self-fertilization. Okay, so here you can see in this image, these are the flowers which show autogamy. Here there is a transfer of the pollens from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, same flower. This is flower 1, this is flower 2. So here the stamens should be present. Okay, so autogamy can take place in both unisexual as well as the sexual flowers. Okay, it can take place, you can say it takes place in both unisexual and bisexual flowers. In bisexual flowers, it should be common. Okay, it is very common in bisexual flower. Bisexual flower means the flower that contain both the reproductive structures. Okay, unisexual flowers, those flowers which consist of either the male reproductive system or the female reproductive system. So in bisexual flower, what happens? Both the reproductive structures are present. Okay, bisexual flowers are also known as the hermaphrodite flower. Clear? So what happens? Anthers are present, or you can say stamens are also present, as well as you can say the pistil is also present. So very easily the pollens which are released from the anthers, they can get transferred to the stigma of the pistil. Clear? Now let's move on. Now in a normal flower which opens and exposes the anthers and the stigma, complete autogamy is rather rare. So what does this mean? So this means the flowers that are open. Okay, so there are two kinds of flowers. Some of the flowers, they are always closed, and some of the flowers are open. So open flowers, they are known as the chasmogamous flower, and the closed flower, they are known as cleistogamous flower. We'll talk about these two types also in the upcoming slides. Now, if the flower are open means the anthers as well as the stigma are exposed to the environment. So what can happen? The pollens from the other plant, okay, they can land on the stigma. And if there is a compatible, if the pollen is compatible, then it can fertilize the egg cell. Okay, so here what does this mean? If the flowers are open and the anthers and stigma are exposed to the environment, then complete autogamy is rather rare. Okay, it will be rare. It will promote cross pollination. So this is cross pollination. So open flowers mostly they will show cross pollination because their stigma is exposed and the pollen from another plant can land on the stigma. So you can write here the pollens from another plant, it can land on the stigma. Now autogamy in such flowers require synchrony in the pollen release and the stigma receptivity, and also the anthers and the stigma should lie close to each other so that pollination can occur. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that the pollen release and the stigma receptivity should be synchronized. So we can write here the pollen release and the stigma receptivity should be synchronized. What does this mean? This means that the pollen release, whenever the pollens are released, at that time stigma should also mature. Okay, so the pollen release should match with the maturation of the stigma. Clear? If the stigma is not receptive, then even if the pollen lands on the stigma, then it will not germinate. Okay, clear? So for autogamy, you can say for autogamy. So these are the conditions for the autogamy. Okay, you can write conditions for the autogamy. There should be a synchrony between the pollen release and the stigma receptivity. Conditions of autogamy. Clear? Now let's move on. Now here, some plants such as viola, which is known as common pansy, oxalis, commelina, they produce two types of flower, chasmogamous flower, okay, which are similar to the flowers of other species with exposed anther and the stigma. So chasmogamous flower, here the flowers remain open, okay, and the anthers and the stigma are exposed to the external environment. So mostly cross-pollination will occur here, and clastogamous flowers, they do not open. Means the anthers and the stigma, they are not exposed. Okay, flowers that do not open, these are known as clastogamous flower. So in clastogamous flower, autogamy will be favored, and in chasmogamous flower, cross pollination can occur. Clear? Because the anthers and the stigma are exposed to the environment, they are exposed to the external pollinators and the external pollens as well. Clear? So there are high chances that the chasmogamous flower, they will show cross pollination, and the clastogamous flower, they will show autogamy. So here in this image, you can see chasmogamous flower. So these flowers are open. And then we have the clastogamous flower. So these flowers are closed. So if they are closed, how they will do the seed setting as well as the fruit formation? Through autogamy. Okay, they will show self-fertilization or self-pollination. Clear? So you can see the flowers are closed here. Here the flowers are open. And the anthers and the stigma, they are exposed. Now we are talking about the clastogamous flowers. Okay. So in these flowers, what happens? The anthers and the stigma lie close to each other. So they are very close to each other. And when anthers dehisce in the flower buds, pollen grains come in contact with the stigma to effect the pollination. So pollens are released afterward, after anther dehiscence. Okay, so in the flower buds, the anther will dehisce and the pollens will obviously come in contact with the stigma of the same flower. Stigma of the same flower, because the flowers are closed. They are not exposed to the external agents. Clear? So this will promote autogamy. Thus, clastogamous flowers are invariably autogamous because these are not open, they remain closed only. Whatever is happening within the flower. So the anthers, as they dehisce, so the pollens will be released and they will be accepted by the stigma of the same flower. So this will promote autogamy, and there is no chance of cross pollen landing on the stigma. So there is no chance of cross pollination. Okay, this is clear. Now the clastogamous flower produce assured seed set even in the absence of the pollinators. So this is an advantage. Okay, so this is an advantage to them. Now pollinators, if there is an absence of the pollinator in certain area, okay, so then autogamy can ensure the seed set. Clear? So this is the kind of advantage. So in the areas where the external agents, also known as the pollinators, so these are absent. So pollinators, what they do? They help in the transfer of the pollens from the anther to the stigma. Okay. So if the pollinators are absent, then also the clastogamous flowers, they can assure their seed set by undergoing autogamy. Clear? Now, do you think there is a question? Do you think that clastogamy is advantageous or disadvantageous to the plant? And then you have to justify it, or why you have to say. So let's talk about the advantages. The first advantage is assured reproduction. Okay, is cleistogamy advantageous? Cleistogamy means when the flowers are closed. Flower remains closed. So advantage is assured reproduction. It will assure reproduction, and assured, you can say seed sets also. Assure seed set and fruit production even in the absence of the pollinator. Okay, even in the absence of the pollinators. Next is the conservation of the resources. So what is happening here in conservation of resources? Plants produce lot of nectar and other things to attract the pollinators. So you can write the plants produce in large quantities such as nectars, and producing this nectar, it utilizes lot of resources of the plant. Okay, and production of this nectar utilizes lots of the resources of the plant. So if the plant is undergoing the autogamy or the self-pollination, then there is no requirement of producing the nectar, because nectar is produced to attract. Okay, it is used to attract the pollinators, because the like honeybees, what they will do, they will feed on this nectar. Okay, and while they are feeding on this nectar, they transfer the pollen grains to the stigma. Okay, so nectars and the production of the colors, different types of colors. Okay, you know petals, they are also of different colors. So this colorful petals, these also attract the plants. Okay, so plant can conserve their resources, okay, by undergoing autogamy. But what are the disadvantages of cleistogamy, or you can say disadvantages of self pollination? There is a reduced genetic diversity. Okay, because what is happening here, there is no contamination from the other resources. Okay, and there only one genome is being, you can say, multiplied. So pollens from the anther are transferred to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, so there will be no increase in the genetic diversity. So this will lead to reduced genetic diversity. No external genes can be added. So if the pollens, okay, are transferred from some another plant, okay, which is known as the cross pollination, then what will happen? This will lead to increase in the genetic diversity, because that pollen, okay, belongs to some other plant, so it has some another type of genes, and during cross pollination there is a fusion between the male and the female gamete. So both male and female gamete will be genetically different, and this will lead to increase in the genetic diversity in case of cross pollination. While in case of the autogamy or self pollination, the pollination is happening within the same flower. Okay, so because of this, it will lead to reduced genetic diversity. And second is the vulnerability to the pathogens. So as the flowers are closed, okay, as the flower are closed, then what will happen? They act as a, you can say, safe place for the pathogen. They act as a safe place for the pathogen. What does this mean? This means that pathogens, okay, they can live inside this flower because it is closed, it is protected. So it is a very safe place for the pathogens. So because of this, okay, because if the flowers are closed, then it will increase to the vulnerability to the pathogens, because they remain closed and they can be inhabited by certain pathogens which can be harmful to the flower as well as the plant. Clear? So this is clear. So now we'll end this lecture and we'll continue with the rest of the topics in the other lecture. So what we were talking about? We were talking about the pollination and different kinds of pollination. So we have started with autogamy first, and then we discussed about the chasmogamy and the clastogamy, and about rest of the topics we'll discuss in the next lecture. Thank you very much for listening.